The world outside is growing quiet, and a story is waiting for you in the stillness. Welcome to Midnight Murmurs Studio, your safe harbor from the noise of the day. Find a comfortable place, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Before our story begins, a gentle reminder for your peaceful rest. For the deepest sleep, it's best to keep your phone at a safe distance from your head. So please take a moment to place your phone on a nearby table or chair. And while it's in your hand for this last moment, a quick tap on like and subscribe becomes a quiet signal to us, a soft murmur in the dark that lets us know these stories are a comfort to you. It's what keeps our studio going. Thank you for that. Now, settle in the heart of the concrete district, where the buildings scraped the sky and blocked out the sun, there was a storefront that looked like a mistake. It was not built of steel or chrome, but of old, dark wood and curved Victorian glass. The windows were perpetually fogged with condensation, blurring the view from the outside, turning the interior into a mysterious smear of emerald green and deep brown. This was the Verdant Jar, a sanctuary for things that grew slowly in the dark. The air inside the shop was vastly different from the dry, exhaust-filled air of the city street. Stepping through the door was like stepping into a rainforest immediately after a storm. The atmosphere was thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of damp earth, a smell known as petrichor. It smelled of crushed basil, wet stones, decaying bark, and the sweet, oxygen-rich breath of photosynthesis. It was a smell that instantly slowed the heart rate, triggering a primal memory of the forest floor, a place where humans had lived long before they built towers of glass. Shelves lined every wall, reaching up to the high, shadowed ceiling. But instead of books or goods, they held worlds. Hundreds of glass vessels sat there, round fish bowls, tall geometric prisms, repurposed apothecary jars, and massive bell jars. Inside each one was a self-contained ecosystem. There were rolling hills of velvet moss, tiny forests of ferns no taller than a finger, and miniature rivers made of blue glass stones. The keeper of these worlds was a man named Silas. Silas was as quiet and unobtrusive as the moss he tended. He wore a canvas apron that was stained with the dark, rich soil of 1,000 potting sessions. His hands were always moving, but never quickly. He held long, slender tweezers and brushes, tools that looked like surgical instruments, but were used for a much gentler operation. He spent his days misting the jars, pruning microscopic leaves, and watching the slow, silent drama of growth behind the glass. For Silas, the chaos of the city outside did not exist. He lived in the microcosm, where he was the benevolent guardian of 1,000 tiny, perfect planets. It was a Tuesday evening, the time when the city rush hour was at its peak. The sound of sirens and honking horns usually penetrated the walls of the shop. But tonight, a heavy rain was falling, muffling the noise into a distant, rhythmic drone. The bell above the door chimed, a soft, crystalline sound that seemed to hang in the humid air. A young woman entered. Her name was Maya. She was an environmental journalist, a person whose job was to document the breaking of the world. She spent her days reading reports on melting glaciers, burning forests, and rising tides. She carried the weight of the entire planet on her shoulders, and her posture reflected it. She was hunched, her eyes darting nervously around the shop, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline or a weapon. Maya shook her wet umbrella, sending droplets flying onto the wooden floor. She looked overwhelmed. The sheer amount of green in the shop seemed to startle her. She was used to gray. She was used to screens. The biological reality of the plants, the smell of the soil, the humidity pressing against her skin, it was all too real, too immediate. I just needed to get out of the rain, she stammered, looking at Silas, who was calmly wiping the inside of a large jar with a microfiber cloth. And the noise, it's so loud out there today. The news, it never stops. Silas looked up. His eyes were the color of faded leaves, gentle and observing. He saw the tension in Maya's jaw, the way her thumbs kept twitching towards her phone screen, scrolling through disasters even while she spoke. He saw a soul that was drowning in the macro, the big, uncontrollable picture of the world. The rain falls on the concrete and it flows away, Silas said softly, his voice barely rising above the hum of the air filters. But here, the rain is captured. It cycles. Nothing is lost. He placed the cloth down and walked towards her. You are carrying too much, miss. The world is too big to hold in one pair of hands. That is why we feel heavy. We try to fix the ocean, but we forget how to tend to a puddle. Maya looked at him, confused but intrigued. She slipped her phone into her pocket, though her hand lingered near it. I feel like if I stop watching, everything will fall apart, she confessed, her voice trembling. It's all so fragile. The ecosystems, the climate, it's all dying. How can you just sit here playing with jars? Silas smiled, a slow expression that deepened the lines around his eyes. He walked over to a shelf and picked up a medium-sized terrarium. Inside, a lush carpet of star moss covered a small hill, with a single perfect Fittonia plant displaying its pink-veined leaves. Condensation clung to the glass walls like diamonds. This is not just a jar, Silas said, holding it up to the light. This is a world. Inside this glass, there is a water cycle. The plants sweat. The water condenses on the glass. It rains back down into the soil. and the roots drink it. It creates its own oxygen. It feeds itself. It is complete. He placed the jar in Maya's hands. "We cannot control the weather outside," Silas continued, gesturing to the stormy street. "We cannot stop the glaciers from melting today. That scale is too large for the human spirit to process every hour of every day. If you try to live in the macrocosm constantly, you will burn out. You need a microcosm. You need a world small enough to govern. A world where you can ensure that everything is safe, everything is green, and everything is growing." Maya looked down at the jar. It was heavy, cool to the touch. She peered through the glass. It looked incredibly peaceful inside. No wind, no storms, just silent, vibrant life protected by an invisible barrier. For a moment, she imagined shrinking down and walking on that mossy hill. It felt safer than anywhere she had been in years. "I want to live in there," she whispered, half joking, half serious. "You can," Silas said. "Or rather, you can build a place like this and put a piece of your mind inside it to rest. Tonight, you will not save the planet, Maya. Tonight, you will just build one small, perfect world, and that will be enough." Silas led Maya to the potting bench at the back of the shop. It was a long, sturdy table made of oak, covered in bins of different materials. There were jars of river stones, bags of activated charcoal, containers of specialized soil, and trays of vibrant, living moss. "We start with the vessel," Silas said, pointing to a selection of empty glass containers. "Choose one. Do not think about which one is best. Choose the one that feels like a home." Maya reached out. She bypassed the modern geometric shapes. Her hand settled on a large, round bowl made of thick, recycled glass. It had a slight green tint and tiny bubbles tracked in the glass, imperfections that made it feel organic. "A good choice," Silas nodded. "A bowl holds. It embraces." He placed the bowl on a turntable. He handed Maya a scoop and pointed to a bin of smooth, polished river pebbles. They were multicolored: gray, tan, white, and speckled. "First, we build the drainage layer," Silas instructed. "In a closed world, the water has nowhere to go if it sits at the bottom. The roots will rot. We must create a space for the excess water to rest, away from the soil." Maya scooped up the stones. She poured them into the bottom of the glass bowl. The sound was incredible. Clatter, clink, slide. The smooth stones hit the glass with a high, clear ringing sound that cascaded into a gentle rumble as they settled. It was the sound of a dry riverbed being filled. "Level it out," Silas said. "Use your hand. Feel the stones." Maya reached into the bowl. The stones were cold and smooth. She moved her hand across them, flattening the pile into an even layer. The tactile sensation of the cold stones against her warm palm was grounding. It pulled her attention away from the abstract worries of the news and focused it entirely on the physical sensation of the rocks. "This is the foundation," Silas murmured, watching her work. "Before you can plant the green, you must lay the stone. You must ensure that even if it rains too hard, there is a place for the water to go. You are building safety, Maya, stone by stone." Maya looked down at the layer of pebbles. It was perfectly flat. It looked solid. For the first time all day, she felt a sense of stability. She wasn't standing on shifting ground anymore. She was building a foundation, and she could feel the solidity of it reverberating up her arms. The layer of river stones lay smooth and flat at the bottom of the glass bowl. Silas reached for a jar filled with a substance that was pitch black and jagged. It looked like crushed obsidian or the remnants of a burnt forest. "This is activated charcoal," Silas said, scooping out a small amount. "It is the most important layer, though it is the thinnest. It is the filter." He gestured for Maya to sprinkle it over the stones. In a closed world, the water recycles endlessly. Without this charcoal, the water would become stagnant. It would grow toxic. The charcoal absorbs the impurities. It keeps the water sweet and the air clean. Maya took the scoop. She tilted it over the stones. The charcoal fell with a light, crisp sound, like dry sugar hitting a porcelain plate. It covered the white and gray stones in a fine dusting of black. "It absorbs the toxins," Maya murmured, watching the black granules settle into the gaps between the pebbles. "It takes the bad stuff and holds it so it doesn't hurt the rest." "Exactly," Silas nodded. "We all need a charcoal layer, Maya. You absorb so much poison from the news, from the screens. You need a filter. You need a way to let the information pass through you without poisoning the roots of your joy. The charcoal doesn't fight the water, it simply cleans it." Maya looked at the black layer. It was a visual representation of purification. She imagined a layer like this inside her own mind, catching the panic headlines and the doom-scrolling anxiety, filtering them out, leaving only clear, clean thoughts to water her spirit. The concept was simple, but seeing it physically laid out in the glass bowl made it feel possible. "Now," Silas said, opening a large wooden bin. The smell that wafted up from the bin was intoxicating. It was the smell of the deep woods, of places where the sun rarely touched the ground. It was a mixture of cocoa coir, peat moss, and organic earth. It was dark, almost black, and fluffy as a cloud. "This is not just dirt," Silas said reverently. "It is potential. It is the matrix where life begins. He handed Maya a trowel, but then he shook his head. No, use your hands. You need to feel the moisture. Maya hesitated for a fraction of a second, her city instincts warning her about germs. But then she plunged her hands into the soil. It was cool and damp. It felt incredibly soft, breaking apart between her fingers like dark flour. It coated her skin, getting under her fingernails, staining her palms. But it didn't feel dirty. It felt rich. She lifted a handful and placed it into the bowl on top of the charcoal. She pressed it down gently. It had a spongy resistance. She added more, building a landscape. Do not make it flat, Silas guided. The world is not flat. Build a hill, create a slope, give the eye a journey. Maya mounded the soil towards the back of the bowl, creating a gentle incline. She sculpted the earth with her fingertips, smoothing out the lumps, creating a tiny valley in the center. The tactile sensation of the cool soil was mesmerizing. It grounded her in the literal sense. The static noise of the digital world faded away, replaced by the physical reality of the earth in her hands. She was playing in the mud, and it was the most serious, important thing she had done all week. With the landscape sculpted, it was time for the inhabitants. Silas brought over a tray of small plants. There were ferns with leaves like delicate lace, phytonias with veins of pink and red, and tiny creeping vines. "Choose your tree," Silas said. "In this world, a fern is a mighty oak." Maya chose a small asparagus fern. Its leaves were feathery and soft, a vibrant, electric green. Silas handed her a pair of long, stainless steel tweezers. They were heavy and precise. "We do not jam the plant in," Silas instructed. "We perform surgery. Use the other end of the tweezers to dig a small hole in the soil, gently." Maya dug a small well in the dark earth. Then she picked up the fern. She shook the excess nursery soil from its roots, revealing the delicate white web of life underneath. "Hold it by the root ball with the tweezers," Silas said. "Lower it in." Maya held her breath. Her hand trembled slightly, but she focused. She lowered the tiny plant into the glass bowl. It felt like lowering a satellite into orbit. She placed it in the hole. "Now, tuck it in," Silas whispered. Maya used the tweezers to push the soil back over the roots, patting it down gently. The fern stood upright, looking proud and bright against the dark soil. It was a single spark of life in the glass void. "You have planted a flag," Silas smiled. "Life has begun." The focus required to plant the tiny fern was absolute. Maya couldn't think about the melting ice caps while she was trying not to crush a root that was thinner than a hair. The microcosm demanded her full attention, and in return, it gave her a break from the macrocosm. "The soil is exposed," Silas observed. "It will dry out. We must cover it. We need a blanket." He brought out a shallow tray filled with moss. It was the most beautiful green Maya had ever seen. It was mood moss, thick, velvety clumps that looked like green hills seen from an airplane. It looked soft enough to sleep on. "Moss has no roots," Silas explained, tearing off a small piece. "It drinks through its leaves. It feeds on the humidity. It is the humblest of plants, yet it creates the softest bed." He handed a piece to Maya. It felt like a damp sponge, cool and springy. "Fit it around the fern," Silas said, "like a puzzle. Cover every inch of the brown soil." Maya began to lay the moss. She tucked pieces around the stem of the fern. She placed a large round clump on the slope she had built, creating a rolling green hill. She pressed the moss down, and it sprang back up, resilient and soft. The transformation was magical. The bowl went from being a container of dirt to being a lush, vibrant landscape. It looked like a fairy tale forest. The green was so intense, it almost hurt her eyes, accustomed as they were to gray concrete and blue screens. She placed the final piece of moss. The soil was completely hidden. The interior of the bowl was now a continuous rolling carpet of emerald velvet. It looked inviting. It looked finished. It's perfect," Maya whispered, staring into the green depths. "It is peaceful," Silas corrected. "Perfection is static. This is alive. It will change. It will grow. But for now, it is safe." Maya leaned in close, her breath fogging the outside of the glass slightly. Inside, the fern stood tall, surrounded by the protective embrace of the moss. It was a silent, breathing world, created by her own hands, protected from the storm outside. The landscape inside the glass bowl was complete. The fern stood tall like a prehistoric tree, and the moss rolled beneath it like an emerald carpet. But it was a dry world. To become a true ecosystem, it needed weather. It needed rain. Silas handed Maya a spray bottle made of amber glass with a brass nozzle. It was filled with distilled water, pure, clean, and free of the chemicals of the city pipes. "Now," Silas whispered, "you become the storm. But be a gentle storm. Do not flood the world. Just wake it up." Maya aimed the nozzle into the bowl. She squeezed the trigger. A fine, almost invisible mist erupted from the brass tip. It drifted down slowly, settling on the leaves of the fern and the velvet surface of the moss. As the water hit the dry soil and the greenery, the scent in the room intensified tenfold. It was the smell of petrichor, the scent of the earth taking a deep breath after a long drought. It smelled of ozone, wet stone, and life itself. Maya watched the water droplets form on the glass walls. They looked like tiny liquid pearls. They slid down the curve of the bowl, disappearing into the soil to feed the roots. The moss darkened instantly, turning from a dusty sage color to a deep, vibrant forest green as it drank the moisture. "Enough," Silas said softly. "The soil is damp. The air is humid. The cycle has begun." Maya lowered the bottle. She felt a strange sense of power, not the destructive power she read about in the news, but a nurturing power. She had created rain. She had brought hydration to a thirsty place. Silas picked up a heavy glass lid. It was perfectly round, designed to fit the rim of the bowl exactly. He held it out to Maya. "This is the hardest part," Silas said, his eyes serious. "Closing the door. Once you put this lid on, you must trust the world to take care of itself. You cannot keep reaching in to fix it. You cannot keep checking the roots. You have given it soil, charcoal, plants, and water. Now you must give it freedom." Maya held the lid. It felt heavy in her hands. Her instinct was to keep meddling, to adjust a leaf here, to add more water there. Letting go of control was terrifying for her. She was used to monitoring, tracking, worrying. "If you leave it open," Silas warned gently, "the water will evaporate. The world will dry out and die. To survive, it must be enclosed. It must recycle its own energy." Maya watched the lush green world she had built. She realized she wanted it to survive. She wanted it to be self-sufficient. She took a deep breath. She lowered the glass lid. It settled onto the rim with a soft, airtight seal. The sound of the glass touching glass was final. The world inside was now separated from the world outside. The humidity was trapped. The oxygen was trapped. The magic was sealed in. Inside the jar, the environment was already stabilizing. Condensation began to fog the glass slightly. The plants were breathing. "It is done," Silas smiled. "It is a closed loop, a perfect circle. Maya paid for the terrarium, though the transaction felt less like a purchase and more like an adoption. She lifted the heavy glass bowl carefully, cradling it in her arms as if it were a sleeping child. "Keep it out of direct sun," Silas advised as he walked her to the door. "Direct sun will cook it. It likes the shade. It likes the quiet corners, just like us." Maya stepped out into the street. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the city slick and reflecting the streetlights. The air was cold, but Maya didn't feel the chill. She was focused entirely on the warm, living weight in her arms. She walked to the subway station. Usually, the crowds and the noise would have spiked her anxiety. She would have pulled out her phone to doom scroll through the latest disasters. But tonight, her hands were full. She couldn't check her phone. She had to protect the moss. She sat on the train, the glass bowl resting on her lap. She stared into it. The condensation had formed a light mist inside the glass, obscuring the ferns slightly, making it look mysterious and distant. It was a private view of a pristine forest right there in the middle of the dirty subway car. She realized that Silas was right. She couldn't save the whole world tonight, but she had saved this piece of green, and she had saved her own peace of mind in the process. The macrocosm was still chaotic, but her microcosm was safe. Maya arrived at her apartment. It was a small, high-rise box, usually filled with the blue light of screens. Tonight, she didn't turn on the TV. She didn't open her laptop. She placed the terrarium on her bedside table, right next to her pillow. She turned on a small, warm lamp. The light filtered through the green leaves and the glass, casting a soft emerald glow across her bedsheets. It looked like an underwater cave or a forest glade at twilight. Maya changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed. She lay on her side, facing the glass world. She watched the tiny water droplets clinging to the inside of the lid. One by one, they grew heavy and fell back down into the moss. Drip, drop. It was a silent rain, a cycle that would continue all night, feeding the plants while she slept. Her breathing slowed down, matching the imagined rhythm of the moss breathing inside the jar. She felt enclosed. She felt protected. The glass wall of the terrarium reminded her that she could build a wall around her own mind, a transparent barrier that let the light in but kept the noise out. Her eyelids grew heavy. The green glow was soothing, a visual lullaby. The anxiety about the melting glaciers and the burning forests faded into the background, replaced by the certainty that in this small, round world, everything was green, everything was watered, and everything was alive. Maya closed her eyes. She imagined herself shrinking down, curling up on the soft bed of velvet moss under the shade of the fern. It was cool, damp, and infinitely quiet. And there, in the safety of her own private ecosystem, the gardener of the glass world finally drifted into a deep, restorative, and earth-heavy sleep.
And so, our story comes to a gentle close. May your mind be calm and your dreams be kind. If you're still listening, we'll be waiting for you here again with another story from Midnight Murmurs Studio. Until then, sleep well.